All right, so I want to welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Northern Nerdcast, where we showcase the geeky, nerdy people, groups, and events that happen in and around the Edmonton area. The Northern Nerdcast is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATV. Please feel free to head on over to albertapodcastnetwork.com for a list of amazing Alberta-made podcasts. We would also like to encourage everyone out there that if you enjoy this episode, to share it with all your friends on social media. This way, we are able to help grow the community here in Edmonton and keep everyone up to date on the latest news and information regarding the geeky and nerdy people, groups, and events that happen in and around the city of Edmonton. Also, if you or someone you know would like to be featured on our show, please feel free to head on over to Alberta Podcast. No, that's not the right one. NorthernNerdNetwork.com. Now, let's get on with the show. All right. Like I said, I want to welcome everyone back to this week's edition of the Nerdcast. My name is Dan Chessel. Today we are joined by none other than the greatest co-hostess to ever co-hosted ever. That is Chelsea Thompson.
Woo!
The great Chelsea Thompson. That's right.
Man, I just got to get comfortable with that mantle you bestow upon me every week, Dan. I don't know. Those are really big boots to fill.
Heavy as the head that wears the crown.
This is true, yes.
Tonight we also have Fawnda and Paul and Andrew. Is Andrew somewhere? He's not.
Andrew is around. He's making pizza.
He's a hero.
Not all heroes wear capes. Some make snacks for their friends while they podcast.
Real heroes wear.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
I'm making pizza, so you will see me intermittently bringing food to these fine folks over here. The kind of producer there is.
That is a producer that everyone needs, really.
Mm-hmm. You don't make any money.
So yes, they are from the I Don't Get It podcast, an award-winning podcast, by the way. Yeah, it's so fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also part of the Alberta Podcast Network. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the show. I don't know. We didn't really discuss this beforehand. Do you guys have something for the Nerd Shelf thing?
Oh, yeah. No, I totally do.
We both do, yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Yes, please.
I'll do his first while I get mine.
So
Bring it on.
We do like to get to the soul of every person we have on the show by asking them what's on their nerd shelf. So we're going to ask Fawnda.
Nerd shelf. Okay, well, while Paul is looking his up on his phone, I have mine.
Okay.
Like this.
Ooh. Bad Wolf.
This is a cross-stitch Bad Wolf thing that I got at the Comic-Con this year because I was like, oh my god, it's cross-stitch and it's beautiful. And also everyone gets the Doctor Who reference from the 10th Doctor Rose storyline, which is the best one. So
are you a large like a huge Doctor Who fan then?
I'm a huge David Tennant fan.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's probably how that really is where my Doctor Who love came from. I was definitely not into it before. I've always been really into Star Trek though, like Generation and like Next Gen and stuff. It was always a big thing for me as a kid, but I only got into Doctor Who when David Tennant started being involved. And ever since, everything that David Tennant has ever done, really.
Well, he was sort of the spawning of the next generation, and so new fans who have sort of hopped on when they revived the show with him. So I don't think you're alone in that boat.
Yeah, I think I also just particularly identified with the Rose storyline because she had like the bangs and the blonde hair, and I was just like, that is so me when I was like, 18 or 19 years old. So, yeah, it's super cool.
That's awesome. How about you, Paul? What's on your shelf?
I've got a picture of a thing. It's a picture of a book that is downloaded on my phone. It's called A Book of Dreams, and it's by Peter Reich. And it is the book that the Kate Bush song "Cloud Busting" is written about. It's sort of she read that book and turned that into a song, which is sort of a big hit, and a video. What's his name? A Canadian, Donald Glover. No, not Donald Glover.
Donald Glover is like Childish Gambino.
Yes.
Definitely not him. But anyway, and I've read it, and I recently found sort of a digital version of it because I don't have the physical copy anymore. And it's just a beautiful, sad book that also connects to this song I really love in pop culture, and I didn't know they were connected at first, and now I do. And so that's
and it just breathed new life into it.
Art inspiring art, which is just kind of inspiring.
Exactly. That's funny. In the video, there's a moment when Kate Bush, who's playing like the child version of Peter Reich, pulls out the book with like a knowing wink to its source material, which is very sweet.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about your guys' podcast a little bit later in the show. But first, I would like to, because I haven't really talked to my co-host in forever, it seems.
Oh,
yeah, it's been a while since we've recorded some. I mean, we record batches now in kind of chunks, and then you do all the post work and all the editing work, and I ride on your coattails, and you put them out every week and make us sound wonderful. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm doing all right. We're getting pretty close to school break time, so all of the small children that I work with are starting to get antsy, and the germs are starting to ratchet up. There was not one, but 2 children in the school I was working at today that vomited in the hallway. So that's how my day went. Yeah. Yeah, it's that time of year, folks. Between rehearsals for Christmas concerts, children are vomiting in the halls.
Well, we had a birthday party on the weekend, and we had, I think, 4 kids bail on us because they were all puking.
Oh, it's going around. Was that Senor Roberto's birthday?
Nehemiah's.
Oh,
we had his party on the weekend.
Nice.
Yeah, Neo's. I don't know about if any kids missed on Robert's birthday or not. That was a fun one too. That was at the zoo.
At the zoo, I saw those pictures. But yeah, other than that, just trucking along, trying to make it to Christmas break. And we've got some background days on set coming up, which will be fun. I get to be a nurse for a few days. That'll be fun. And yeah, just trying to make it to the break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drink lots of orange juice and all the healthy stuff.
How about let's go with Paul this time. Paul, how's your week been?
It's been good. I just went down to Calgary to visit some friends who'd moved up there recently. So that was just like a fun hang with some friends weekend. I rode the bus, so I didn't have to worry about driving home on Sunday, which was a big old thing. Those roads were pretty bad. And then yeah, it was sort of I do improv with Rapid Fire Theater, and we had our party this weekend, so that was nice on Sunday night. So I came back for. So now,
nice.
Toasting. My day job's at the Art Gallery of Alberta, so it's been pretty chill. It's been a pretty quiet week.
Lovely.
That's awesome. I have a friend of ours that is part of Rapid Fire as well.
Oh yeah.
Her name is Danielle.
Oh yeah, Danielle. She's great.
Switch. Danielle Brown.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Anyways, how about Fawnda? How's your week been?
Well, I'm just kind of getting back into the swing of things. I got back from Ottawa a couple days ago. I was I was there for the Governor General's Literary Awards, which is part of another job.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. I've never been to the, nation's capital before. But for sort of like another kind of little bit of a nerd moment, I went to Parliament and I watched Question Period for an hour.
Nice.
That was pretty super cool. Trudeau wasn't there because it was the morning that he had signed the new big thing, the new NAFTA, which has a different acronym now.
Yeah, because we should all call it the new NAFTA because that's what we should all call it.
And they were all getting a little touchy over it on either side. It was pretty cool just to witness. I actually think that Canadian Parliament is a lot sassier than I think other parliaments are. There's like a lot more professionalism, I think, and like decorum that goes into like the way that other parliaments deal with the arguments and things like that. But like Canadians, like they're just yelling across the way. The speaker's like, everybody calm down. For I was impressed, and I was also impressed with the arts representation in Ottawa. Like the National Arts Center has a beautiful facility, and so many. There's a lot of public art that's around there. Amazing kind of like Gothic government buildings and things out there. So I don't know. I'm just sort of like coming back down off of that sort of high being in Ottawa to kind of like, oh yeah, it's snowy here and dry and yeah. What's happening? Well, there's a lot of theater. There's still a lot of theater happening. It's Christmas. Let's not kid ourselves.
A lot of nutcrackers.
A lot of nutcracker sort. You know what was funny? I went to Ottawa, and the one thing on the main stage at the National Arts Center was Alberta Ballet's Nutcracker.
Inescapable.
So I'm like, what am I going to say?
You just can't get rid of it.
On the biggest stage in the city. I'm like, I am not gonna go see in Ottawa.
You got to go all the way to Ottawa to go see our ballet.
No.
See it here.
But that's actually I feel a good testament to the strength of Alberta Ballet's company.
Yep.
Tour to Ottawa and Toronto, and actually I know they go to Vancouver as well.
Yeah.
Because they're actually that good. They're not that
good. This is true. Well, that's awesome.
How about you, Dan? How's your week been?
Well, my week's been interesting. So if people have been kind of sort of watching online a little bit, it's been pretty quiet for the last little while. Recently, my father actually passed away.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Unfortunately, and yesterday we did the funeral and everything, so that's sort of the reason why we're kind of thrown together tonight, because I just got here and unfortunately this is the way it is. But we're back. I'm excited to be here and doing the podcast again, so that's the way it is.
Thank you guys for being our first guest back after a chunk of time off.
Thanks for having us.
Rolling again.
So much, yeah.
It's all good. All right, so we're going to do our first break here, and then we're going to get right into the show.
Right?
Woohoo! That's right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one of our affiliated podcasts, Back to School Again. It's a podcast about people who made the decision in midlife to return to school, either to pursue a new type of career, to augment their current career, or just for the sheer challenge of learning something new. It chronicles the personal journey of host Katrina Ingram, who's back in school after more than 2 decades away. It features conversations with a wide range of midlife learners who are currently enrolled in post-secondary studies or who have recently completed a post-secondary degree. The podcast shares their stories, what brought them to this moment, how they balance the responsibilities of school, work, and family, and where they hope their educational pursuits will take them. The podcast is available now in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and most other podcatchers. You can also find the episodes and the show notes at backtoschoolagain.ca. Back to School Again is presented by Norquest College and is an affiliated member of the Alberta Podcast Network. Find it and our other amazing Alberta-made podcasts and our affiliates at albertapodcastnetwork.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. All right. Like I said earlier, we have the great Fawnda and Paul joining us from the I Don't Get It podcast, the award-winning podcast. I need to. How do you do that?
One time.
Hey, it's more awards than I've got.
It's an award that you won.
We'll take it. We'll take it for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And yes, they are part of the Alberta Podcast Network. And so let's just start off with just sort of the basic. What is the I Don't Get It podcast?
Mm-hmm.
I Don't Get It is a podcast about performances in Edmonton. So Fawnda and I are both sort of theater and dance critics. We both worked at sort of the alt weeklies for years. And then so we go out and we see shows that are happening around town, and then we talk about them sort of as critics, what we liked, what we found challenging or intriguing, and really get into sort of what makes them stand out for us, and if we get them or not.
Yeah, that increasingly, we started out only reviewing contemporary dance,
Right.
And so we started expanding to other performance and other things. Over a couple of years, we've been doing this now since 2013.
Sure. There was a gap year where we didn't do any somewhere in there, but this is season 5.
Yeah. And so, and now we've actually also kind of like broadened out into discussing arts happenings in general, and like kind of trying to increase the discourse around what's happening in the arts community and what's working and what major bodies like the Arts Council are doing as well.
Nice.
So what? Let's start sort of with your history on what brought you into arts, even here in Alberta or in like in Edmonton area. Like, what was the thing that brought you into just this whole scene in the first place?
I'll let you start.
Yep.
You want me to start?
You
start.
Cool. I moved to Edmonton. I'm from Fort McMurray. That's where I grew up. But I moved here for school in like 2005. And then I'd started writing for the student newspaper at the U of A, the Gateway.
Yay!
And I started mostly writing about music at the time. I really liked interviewing bands and reviewing records and that sort of thing. And then as I started to freelance, sort of different opportunities came up, and I started doing things like theater and coverage like that sort of thing. And eventually View, who I've been freelancing for, needed sort of like a regular theater writer. And I knew a bunch about theater at that point, so I said I would do it, and that sort of got me into that world to start things off.
How about you, Fawnda?
I kind of came from a sort of a different angle, I guess. I grew up in the city as a theater kid, doing arts and theater here, and then went to university for an English degree. I moved away, and then when I came back, I started working at C Magazine and actually reporting on the arts. And it made me feel a little bit like that I wanted to do something that was a little bit more integrated and engaged with the arts. So I started running arts companies.
Yeah.
And now I've sort of like, I'm still doing that, but I've also kind of come out the other side as reporting on that again. And what's been very cool is that I've been able to carry my love, my absolute adornment and love for contemporary dance all the way through. And I hopefully am actually keeping dance in the forefront in the whole milieu of arts coverage as trying to.
So talk us through, I mean, this is a staple question I ask all the time, but talk us through a bit of like the genesis of how it started, of like how you guys got hooked up, and then how is like people very familiar with doing what you're doing in the written medium decided like, oh, hey, we should turn this into a podcast. Like, where did the kernel of that idea come from?
Yeah, we were living in the same building at the time.
Same apartment building, yeah.
And I was Fawnda's editor at View. And Fawnda was writing about dance. And that was
my beat.
That was your beat. And I didn't know anything about dance. And Fawnda sort of repeatedly, when we would hang out, would be like, you should come see some dance. You should come see some dance. And eventually one night, I don't remember exactly what led us there, but we were like, okay, let's start a podcast, because you know so much about dance and I know nothing about dance, where we go see dance and talk about it from both like an experienced perspective and like a dumb perspective. And
it's not a dumb perspective. It's just sort of like a new, you know,
an uninitiated perspective. And so then we just started, because we already sort of had connections in the art scenes as far as media went. We started booking tickets to see shows, and then talking about it. And we got a lot of sort of good feedback from the community at that time, and so we really sort of leaned into it. And kept going.
So then in your 5 seasons of all the shows that you've seen and all the conversations that you have, do you have moments that stick out or shows that you saw that either your opinions of them were wildly different and that led to like a crazy conversation, or ones that you didn't understand at all, the both of you, and that led to, are there favorites that stick out or ones that were most memorable that stick out in all of your years of doing this?
I think
all of our years.
All of our years.
Wow, that sounds like.
For me, I think what sticks out is a couple times now it's called the Chinook Festival, but formerly there was a sort of a contemporary dance festival called Expanse. And we got to be sort of like on the ground, sort of doing live reporting from there. They like set us up in a room in the Arts Barns. And so we were sort of like, for a weekend, just like interviewing artists, seeing shows, saying what we thought. And that was really fun. That was sort of like, I think what stands out to me as far as like things in the podcast was just like really immersing yourself in a weekend where it's like, yeah, I'm going to be here from 2 until 11 every night and just doing this thing and putting together a podcast and then showing up for the next one and
watching stuff.
all the stuff.
I think I can think of a couple moments where, I do like to think of how far we've come.
Sure, yeah.
Like from the initial blanket fort, which was a literal blanket fort. You'll hear early episodes about how we recorded in a blanket fort and we bragged about it for about 3 years.
And then our knees got really sore and we stopped.
And we're just like, we're too old for this. So there's that. And actually, the way that we used to record was on a Zoom mic.
Yeah.
With that, so we actually have video recordings of all of us doing the blanket fort recording
in our shadowy blanket
that Andrew would only edit the audio, but he still has all the video for it. So those will surface one day. And I think that there are a couple of shows that I know that I got the opportunity to see that Paul maybe didn't see.
Sure, yeah.
I can think of one show in particular where I couldn't actually like emotionally even talk about it without cracking up, like crying, not laughing. Yeah. But I was so affected by it that I couldn't get the words out. And I thought, damn it, Paul, you should have seen this show so that you could say what happened.
Yeah.
And so that I could just cry in the corner. But like, so there's been a couple instances like that where, feel very fortunate to see as much work as we do.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we get to see a lot more than a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. So, every so often there is like that one show that just is just a clincher emotionally and is very hard to talk about because I'm just a super emotional person.
Great.
So yeah, I guess those are the ones I remember.
So writing together in environments together and then podcasting together, do you ever find now that when you find yourself possibly seeing a show solo of one another that bits of each other's aesthetic have sort of worn off on each other and you find yourself sort of watching things sort of maybe critiquing or from the perspective of the other person's, what they like and don't like?
Especially these days when I go see contemporary dance and Fawnda can't come, it's always like, what would Fawnda think? What's even if she's not here. Because it's sort of like through those discussions, like I've started to get it a little more about dance and that sort of thing, and that definitely comes from hearing you talk about dance and talking about dance with you. And so starting to definitely have similar. I don't think we ever have like totally opposing views. We seem like often we're on the same page or similar pages about how a show was, but.
Yeah, we're often really close where it comes to the takeaway. I think that in a lot of ways, what's been refreshing about Edmonton theater and dance, or theater in particular, in the last couple of years, is that there's a lot more female perspective and female views. And so I always try and consider, what is Paul taking away from this that is different than what I am taking away. Because I think that it's important to kind of maintain, that your audience could be anyone. Your audience is still everyone, not just all of like the super feministas in the audience. Not saying you're not a super feminista.
Thank you.
Which I think you are.
Thank you.
But just like thinking you know, like when we watch a show like Pretty Goblins, or which has a lot to do with, you know, like assault on women and things like that, and women's experience. I know that I'm having an extreme emotional reaction to the show because of the, you know, just because of who I am and what I know about the characters in the show. And I'm also wondering, like, also what is Paul as an audience member getting from the show, because he's not a female. and that. So I think that there's ways that, yeah, definitely we try and check in with like what each other's experience is, especially when we're talking about it afterward. I think those like those few minutes in the car or like walking to the bus stop or whatever after a show are kind of like our immediate sort of like hot take. Like we know what our immediate reactions and how we feel about something are.
Yeah, totally.
There's a definite check-in that happens.
That's awesome. That's kind of like my wife. She's like when I met her, like she's part of like modern dance, right? She took modern dance at school. She went to Vancouver, SFU.
Oh, sweet.
Go do modern dance, right? And like when I met her, I had no idea about any of that kind of stuff at all. And just to be introduced into that kind of world was just like, I had no idea. Like it's just dancing. Isn't all dancing the same? No.
Right. Yeah, right. These are the things we learned by seeing. Yeah.
And so it's nice to hear when you get two different kind of perspectives like yourselves, and be able to bring that together is kind of awesome, right?
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been fun to even just to have those conversations, because it's sort of like if you go see a show with your friends, hopefully you talk about it a bit in the car, but then it's sort of like you walk away and you think about the rest of your day and whatever else. So it's nice to sort of have like, you know, half an hour to just like go back and be like, what did we see? Let's talk about the things that still stand out and how that made us feel. And, oh, that makes you feel this way. That makes me think about this other point differently. And then we can unpack that as well.
And also just kind of to talk about it like writers, because I think that like when you go and see stuff with your friends, we often don't actually allow that time for real discourse afterward.
It was good.
Yeah.
I didn't like this.
Great. Okay, you know, let's go have a beer, you know, and then you don't talk about the show or like get into the grit of it. And I think that we're nerds for that. Like that's our thing. So.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really good to just hear another person talk about it from their point of view.
Yeah.
Right. Like I personally, when I go to see something, I see it from my side of things. And yeah, it's great to hear somebody else's takeaway from that as well. Are there moments for you guys when you guys come out of a show and you guys just don't see eye to eye on anything?
Trying to think like if we've ever had any that have just been like a total opposite of a viewpoint.
Total separate. Yeah. I mean, our first show was kind of, I waited to hear what you said, because our first episode, I feel like, is a little bit notorious in certain ways because we saw a Brian Webb show that Brian Webb was dancing in.
Yep.
It was bad.
I've never actually seen Brian Webb actually dance.
I mean,
I've seen a lot of it. I've seen his shows before, but I don't think I've ever seen him do anything.
And he has had some shows in years since where he has danced that have been like really interesting, surreal, good storytelling. But this particular one was just, I mean, I remember waiting to see like, oh God, what is Paul gonna say? Because
and I was kind of like, what have I gotten myself into with this?
What is this thing?
It's all going to be like this?
Is this contemporary dance?
I truly did not get it in that moment.
Yeah.
And frankly, I didn't either. Like it was.
Well, I'll have to tell you something. When I first saw my wife's, at the time we were dating, the first time I ever saw one of her modern dances, she was just falling over and over. Like that's all she did throughout the whole thing. I didn't get any of it. I don't understand it. I'm like, what is this? I don't like, and I just don't. I'd like, and that's one of those things. I'm like, I'll never understand. But
yeah, and it was one thing I found like was interesting, sort of moving from like thinking about theater in this way, because at that point I'd reviewed lots of theater, to thinking about dance was sort of like how there isn't always a narrative in dance the way there is theater. No. But you can find emotional arcs and changes and things like that. But you have to sort of learn how to look for those in a different way.
You need to feel your way through it, you know, like, and it has a different vocabulary, one that is not narrative. And I think that as a writer about dance for years, it was one of the biggest challenges that I had was to try and put into words things that I could only see and feel. And I think that was sort of inherently one of the personal reasons that I tried to keep pursuing the podcast, was because I really enjoyed that challenge, still trying to figure out how to describe what this is and how to make people, how to still make it enticing in a way.
Yeah, because when you were putting it, like I would read your dance reviews and they would make coherent sense. I would, they would sound like in ways I could unpack and understand. And then having now seen a bunch with you, I have a greater respect for that as well. And just like seeing, it's hard to take this thing that doesn't have a narrative and talk about it in a way that is sort of structured like a narrative, and that you're telling a review of what you liked and what you didn't like and what the arc of the show is and what deeper meanings were. And like, it's hard to draw all of that out when you're not sort of handed it, when it's not handed to you in sort of a story. So yeah, that takes a lot. It takes a lot of skill.
And that's the other thing is like from my wife teaching me over the years, it's like not everything does have a narrative. So what do you do for those people who come into a show and like I'm sure you guys have interactions with other people out there in the community and stuff like that. What do you have to say to those people when they go see a show like that, where it's a dance show and there is no narrative? Like, how do you explain that to people?
I always like to say that you said that it takes a certain skill, but I think that what it really takes is just a little bit of familiarity, or at least like a checking in on what do you know about visual and physical language, and how does this measure up in terms of what you've seen before. So, if you are just able to sit back and watch the positions that a dancer is putting themselves into, the music that they're using, the feeling that the entire thing is trying to convey, not just, like one crook of the elbow or something like that, but like as a whole, it's a lot more about just sort of like where you allow your mind, I think, to let it take you. What I've learned over the years is that it is uncomfortable to watch bodies doing things that you're not used to. It's not like watching a hockey game or a ballet performance. Sometimes ballet is very technical, precise, skill and virtuosic in a lot of times. And a lot of times you will be watching a performance that is like that. But if you're watching a performance that isn't, I think that what I would say is to just try and allow your mind to understand where that body is and why it's moving that way. Don't question too much about what it's about, but just like, what does that feel like? And let your mind sort of go from there. I have had a number of dance choreographers and performers tell me that the very first contemporary performance that you should see, maybe there should be some like substance involvement. Like maybe like I know it's a family show, so but just like something just to be able to allow yourself to let go a little bit more and see, because we are really, really restrictive on actually the way that we watch bodies move. We have a lot of hang-ups on how emotions can be expressed and things like that. And I think that there's a whole breadth of emotional awareness that the body and expression through the body allows, that and especially in performance, not just even through physical contact or anything like that, but just through like actually seeing interesting kinds of physical performance. Like I think circus is interesting in that way, that like you see incredible, like virtuosic, very athletic movement, also sometimes very unusual movement that involves clowning and things like that, and emotional expression. It really does take your mind in different places than something like, you know, just like a straight narrative piece of theater.
Yeah. I would just say, like, one of the things I've maybe learned as far as I talked about, like, learning to watch this sort of thing. And for me, it was mostly about like realizing that it's not what I don't get. Like, I don't need to know the history of dance or contemporary dance. It's just being okay with saying how I felt about it, and whatever I'm seeing and however I'm reacting to that is valid. And sort of the confidence of that, rather than feeling like, oh, I don't get it, I don't know how to talk about that, then sort of like, well, this is how I felt, so let's unpack sort of where that came from and why, and maybe that will lead us to deeper things.
Nice. That's really good, actually.
So discussions like that, can you guys talk a bit about the community that you guys live in, the pieces that you get to go and see, and sort of how, you know, what kind of community does Edmonton have going for it? And how have you found the feedback to people who are coming across your podcast and listening to it? And have you gotten any really encouraging feedback from any listeners that have stumbled across your podcast?
Yeah, I think like Edmonton is a wonderful arts city. There's always been a very vibrant theater community and support for the arts, whether it's at the Fringe, which is of course such a massive thing here, but even during the rest of the season, there's such a dedicated audience going to theater, and I think dance as well. Dance is sort of vibrant, and more than ever, it seems like there are interesting groups sort of popping up and taking shape and doing things, as well as companies like the Brian Webb Company or Alberta Ballet, which not only present their own works, but bring in works from other parts of the world. So you get a taste of what, Ontario's doing, what and recently India's doing, like what,
or
even
the Houston Ballet, or Montreal companies like Ballet Jazz. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, when we first started up, we had some pretty strong support from the dance community. Because the dance community wasn't getting a lot of other dedicated coverage.
Right. Finally actually talking about their work and unpacking it in this way, rather than just like the cursory sort of, it happened, but like, what?
Yeah. I mean, I think over the years, us both coming from See and View, you know, we've seen the decline of print arts coverage, and them struggle to maintain online coverage too. And even the Journal has changed a lot. Like Post Media has kind of changed the way that local arts gets covered. So I think that's why we've also kind of expanded the mandate to be just beyond reviewing contemporary dance. We're now reviewing performance, and we're trying to talk largely about happenings in the arts community. And we are trying to cover more about where the scene is going, or things that are happening, or things that we think people should be aware of. Because not only as media, but as artists ourselves, we have a vested interest in making sure that there is critical dialogue about the community at large too.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we think of the word criticism, our like image of a critic is like the scowly guy in the corner who's, doesn't like anyone and writes their notes and, upturns their evil collar and walks out into the night.
It's like, as I pull my collar.
But I think like criticism is more about having a dialogue and sort of looking at what is happening and thinking about it in a way that like really looks at all of the parts of it and what works and what doesn't. And that doesn't have to be, the critic versus the artist. It can be a conversation. And ideally, something like this is sort of the start of a conversation, and people get a chance to listen to us unpack it a little bit, and then maybe we'll have those sorts of discussions with the people they saw shows with as well, is the hope, the dream.
Yeah, you don't want it to be a versus conversation, and I think that that's what people often think that arts criticism and artists are, which is not what we're trying to do.
That's really good. I do have one question from our audience here. It is from someone who actually did your guys' panel over at the Edmonton Expo.
Oh.
Dog Daytona. He just kind of helped you guys out apparently. He told me that you guys were there.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, he was asking, what would you guys say was kind of like the turning point for you guys, where you went from this is just kind of the thing we did after the show until this is something we should be really doing?
I think for me, after that first show, which was a little rough, some of the other ones we saw that season were much more interesting, and the conversation was fun. It was fun to look at this thing that I didn't know the language of and sort of try and figure my way through that. And so I'd say like halfway through the first season, I remember thinking like, as I went up the elevator, 10 floors to my apartment from Fawnda and Andrew's apartment, it was like, yeah, this is good. This is a good thing.
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of where we hit our stride too, was that kind of like in the middle of that first season, we're like, I think we're onto something here. Like, I think we actually have a model. And I think there was actually another podcast that I was listening to called the Long Form Podcast. I don't remember the name of the writer at the moment, but they were interviewing a woman who was the public editor at the New Yorker or the New York Times. And she was saying, if there's one thing that you do well, even if it's very niche, like contemporary dance, you should just keep doing that and keep hammering on it. And I heard that. I remember sitting in the car with Andrew because we were listening on an audio file, and I thought, oh my god, we're doing it. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was around that, like when we started in 2013, so that must have been like the spring of 2014, where we are all kind of just sort of like coming around to like, maybe we have something here. And shortly after that, we won the Yagi.
But also we've been doing it with consistency. It hadn't like petered off after one or two. I hadn't been like, no, I've got other plans. I'm not coming back.
We had good energy about it. We all still wanted to see things. Andrew was really into like editing and getting it out real quick, and like we were pretty consistent for like a kind of like fly by night operation for the start. Yeah.
That's really good. Where can people find you guys? Because I mean, I love your show. To be honest with you, I always find it very interesting and engaging. But where can other people find you guys? Either on web or on social media, that kind of stuff.
You can find us on idon'tgetitYeg.com. Our Twitter handle is idon'tgetitYeg. We are also on Facebook, of course, and the Alberta Podcast Network, and the CKUA radio app.
Woohoo!
Awesome. All right, so we are going to take a quick little break here. We're going to talk a little bit about some of our sponsors, and then we'll return and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the events that are happening in the Edmonton area. So stay tuned.
Cool.
All right. So, of course, we are part of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. And, ATB has been like one of the main sponsors for the Alberta Podcast Network since, the very beginning. And we do all our banking through ATB. And I can honestly tell you, I actually really do enjoy using ATB for everything that we do. And it's one of those things that I go to the branch and I go and talk to our financial advisor there, and every time I'm there, they always have something for us. They always have an answer, or they're willing to go out of their way to give us a hand with something. So if you guys would like to know more information about ATB, just head on over to their website, atb.com, or atb.ca. And you guys will find all your information there. And you know what? ATB listens. So go and do that and become a member of the ATB family. And that is it. All right. So, like I said, we got some events happening in the Edmonton area.
Tell us all about it, Dan. Inquiring minds want to know where they can get their geek on.
That's right. Tomorrow, if you're listening to the podcast, you probably missed it. Because
Wednesday, December 5th.
Wednesday, December 5th is at the Sock. We're on Stupid Tour.
At the Sock, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Still going.
This is happening at the Union Hall at 7 o'clock to 10:30. So if you want to go see Ed the Sock, he's going to be in town tomorrow on December 5th. Now, the rest are kind of all events that are going to be happening way in the future. But these are kind of the marquee events that I just kind of want to hit on real quick. So we're just going to quickly go through these because we don't really have a whole lot happening in December because, I mean, it's Christmas and everyone's kind of getting ready for all that kind of fun stuff. So there's lots of like Christmassy things that are going on that are nerdy and geeky, but I figured we just kind of hit on some of the major events that are happening a little bit later on in the year. So we got DPX Spring. This is happening on May 3rd. So mark your calendars. This is happening at the Old Strathcona Performing Arts Center. Moving along, we have Press A to Start 2019, and this is happening on April 20th. And this is happening on... I just have an address. So I think it's at McEwen. It's the McEwen Development Club that's doing it. So Press A to Start. Go on Facebook or on our website, and you'll find all that information. Calgary Expo is happening on April 25th to 28th, so mark that down. Animathon, we got August 9th, and Drumheller is happening on August 24th. And this is the Dinosaur and Comic Expo. I mean, when you put dinosaurs and comics together,
absolutely, best things happen.
You can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong. Yes, that's just it. So I want to thank Fawnda and Paul here. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic. I got to meet Fawnda the one time. I didn't get to meet.
Yeah, we saw a show. We saw a Northern Light Theater show.
Yes, we did.
Mhm.
And so it was awesome to be a part of that. And it was awesome that you guys were able to come on our show tonight. So thank you guys so much. Where can people once again find all that awesome, I don't get it, awesomeness?
We're at idon'tgetityeg.com. You can follow us at idon'tgetityeg, and get us on iTunes and all of the other Stitcher, all the things through Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. And thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Woohoo!
Sure.
It's always a pleasure having fellow podcasters and fellow Alberta podcast networkers on the show. We love meeting members of the family.
Yay!
All right, so we want to thank everyone out there who listens to this show and ask everyone, if you can, to share it with your friends on social media. This Northern Nerdcast is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATV, and is produced by myself, along with Chelsea Thompson and Trina Schessel. You can find us more information on the Northern Nerd Network by checking us out on our Twitter at Northern_Nerd, Facebook.com/NorthernNerd, YouTube.com/Northern Nerd Network, or on our very own website, NorthernNerdNetwork.com. Well, that's all the time we have. And I want to thank everyone for listening to this edition of the Nerdcast. And we'll see you guys on the next one.